You know what hit me the hardest when I first sat down at an Amish table in Lancaster County? It wasn't the food itself. It was the silence before it. Everyone bowed their heads, nobody touched a thing, and for about 30 seconds, the whole room just stopped. Then the bowls started moving, and I took my first bite of something that I genuinely cannot explain. A simple chicken and dumpling dish. Nothing fancy, no restaurant plating, no exotic ingredients, no technique I'd seen on any cooking show. But it was the best thing I had eaten in 20 years of cooking. I drove home that evening, and I kept asking myself the same question the whole way. What did they do that I've been missing? I want to be honest with you before we get into this. I've been cooking since my early 30s. I've watched more tutorials than I can count. I've owned every gadget that Williams-Sonoma ever convinced me I needed, and I've cooked out of cookbooks that cost more than my first car. But nothing I learned in any of that prepared me for what I discovered spending time around Amish kitchens in Pennsylvania and Ohio. Don't cook the way we were taught to cook. They don't follow trends. They don't optimize for speed or convenience. They cook the way their great-grandmothers cooked, and their great-grandmothers' grandmothers before that. And the result is food that tastes like food is supposed to taste: deep, warm, satisfying in a way that goes past your stomach and into something you can't quite name. Today, I'm going to walk you through the 7 secrets behind that kind of cooking. And stay with me to the end, because the last one is something so simple that you'll wonder why nobody talks about it. But it might be the single biggest reason Amish food tastes the way it does. Secret 7, they start with fat, not fear. The first thing that jumps out at you in an Amish kitchen is what they cook with, and I mean that literally. You smell it before you even see it. There's no bottle of canola oil sitting on the counter. No spray can of anything. No label that says heart healthy or 0 calorie. What you find instead is a crock of lard next to the stove, a jar of bacon drippings saved from the morning's breakfast, and a block of real butter sitting right out on the counter at room temperature. Not refrigerated, just there, soft and ready. The Amish have never participated in the low-fat craze that swept through American kitchens starting in the 1980s, and their food tells you everything you need to know about that decision. When you sought onions in lard that was rendered from a hog raised on their own farm, you get a depth of flavor that a neutral-tasting vegetable oil cannot produce, no matter how long you cook it. When you make a pie crust with real leaf lard, you get that shattering, tender flakiness that professional pastry chefs spend years chasing. Fat carries flavor. That's not an opinion, it's chemistry. Fat-soluble compounds in your ingredients, the aromatic molecules in herbs, the caramelized sugars in vegetables, they dissolve into fat and get distributed throughout the dish in a way that water-based cooking simply cannot replicate. The Amish figured this out not through food science journals, but through generations of cooking and tasting. The practical takeaway here is straightforward. Stop being afraid of real animal fats. Keep a jar on your stove for bacon drippings. Buy a good quality lard from a butcher or a farmer's market. Use real butter and use enough of it. Your food will taste better immediately and dramatically. I switched my scrambled eggs from olive oil to butter and bacon fat about 3 years ago, and I have not gone back once. Secret 6, nothing gets wasted. Everything gets flavor. The second thing I noticed in every Amish kitchen I spent time in was what wasn't there. There were no half-used cans in the recycling bin, no vegetable trimmings in the trash, no bones thrown away after a roast. Everything that came into that kitchen had a purpose, and when its first purpose was done, it had a second one. The chicken carcass left after Sunday's roast goes into the pot Monday morning with onion skins, carrot tops, celery leaves, and whatever herb stems were left over from the week. That becomes the stock that goes into the soup on Tuesday. The fat skimmed from that stock goes into the frying pan for Wednesday's cornbread. The bread that went stale on Thursday gets torn up and turned into Friday's stuffing or bread pudding. This is not frugality for the sake of frugality. It's a cooking philosophy, and the practical result is layers of flavor that you simply cannot build any other way. When you make a soup with real homemade stock instead of the stuff from a cardboard carton, you taste the difference in the first spoonful. Real stock has gelatin from the bones, minerals from the vegetables, fat from the meat. All of it simmered together over hours into something that coats your lips and fills your mouth with a richness that commercial broth doesn't even attempt to imitate. The habit to build here is simple. Start saving. Keep a bag in your freezer, and throw in every vegetable scrap, every herb stem, every Parmesan rind, every chicken bone. When the bag is full, make stock. It costs you almost nothing, and it will improve every soup, every sauce, and every grain dish you make for the rest of your cooking life. Secret 5. The oven is not the enemy of the stovetop here. Something I watched happen in an Amish farmhouse kitchen that I've thought about almost every week since. The woman cooking that day started a pot roast on the stovetop in a heavy cast iron Dutch oven. She seared that meat on every single surface until it had a deep brown crust. She took her time with it. She didn't rush to cover it and slide it in the oven. She let the fond build on the bottom of that pot, deglazed it with a splash of cider vinegar and a bit of water, scraped up every bit of color from the bottom, and then she added her vegetables and her aromatics, and only then did the pot go into a low oven, where it would stay for the better part of the afternoon. That single pot became a meal that fed 11 people and left everyone quiet in the best possible way. What she understood, what the Amish have always understood, is that a great slow-cooked dish is not something you assemble and forget. It's something you build in stages, each stage developing a different kind of flavor. The sear creates the Maillard reaction, those hundreds of complex flavor compounds that form when proteins and sugars hit high dry heat. The deglaze captures every bit of that flavor from the pan and pulls it into the liquid. The long, low oven time breaks down collagen into gelatin and tenderizes tough connective tissue into something silky and rich. None of those stages can replace the others. Skip the sear, and you have stewed meat with no depth. Skip the low, slow finish, and you have browned meat that's tough and dry. Do them both in sequence, and you have something that tastes like it took all day because it did, and that's exactly the point. Secret 4. Spices are used with intention, not abundance. I want to tell you about a bowl of bean soup I had at a farm in Holmes County, Ohio, that stopped me mid-conversation. It was navy beans, slow-cooked with a ham hock, some onion, a bay leaf, black pepper, and a pinch of dried thyme. That was it. No garlic powder, no paprika, no cumin, no 14-spice blend from the specialty store. Just 5 ingredients doing exactly what they were meant to do without any of them trying to be the star. The soup tasted like the best version of itself, clear and honest, and deeply satisfying. What I realized watching Amish cooks work is that they treat seasoning as a finishing act of precision, not a covering act of abundance. They're not trying to make something taste like something else. They're trying to make it taste more like what it already is. They use dried herbs grown in their own gardens, ground spices, bought in bulk, and used quickly before they lose their potency, and salt added at multiple stages of cooking so it has time to penetrate and harmonize rather than just sitting on the surface. They don't reach for more spice when something tastes flat. They reach for more time, more heat, more patience, because more often than not, the flavor they're looking for is already in the pot. It just hasn't finished developing yet. The lesson here is to practice restraint. The next time you cook, try cutting your spice quantities in half and doubling your cooking time. Taste every 15 minutes. Notice what happens to the flavor as the dish develops. You may find that everything you were adding was covering up a depth that just needed more time to emerge. Secret 3, they cook for the table, not for the plate. There is no concept of individual plating in an Amish kitchen. You will never see a sprig of parsley artfully placed on a single serving of food. What you will see is a pot big enough to swim in, a casserole dish the size of a small child, a bowl of mashed potatoes that could feed a small neighborhood, and you'll see it all put directly in the center of the table where everyone reaches for it together. This is not just a cultural preference. It fundamentally changes how the food is made. When you're cooking for a table instead of a plate, you think in different terms. You think about balance across an entire spread rather than composition on a single dish. You think about how the sweetness of the corn complements the saltiness of the ham, how the acidity of the pickled beets cuts through the richness of the gravy, how the simple starchiness of the bread gives everyone a base to build from. Every dish on an Amish table is designed to work with every other dish on that table. Nothing is meant to be eaten alone, and the result is a meal where the whole is dramatically greater than the sum of its parts. The pickled thing makes the rich thing taste richer. The sweet thing makes the savory thing taste more savory. The bread makes everything go further and taste better. When you start thinking this way in your own kitchen, you stop asking, "What am I making tonight?" and start asking, "What does tonight's table need?" That shift in thinking changes everything about how you plan a meal and how it ultimately tastes. Secret to fermentation is the quiet workhorse. Walk into any Amish root cellar in Lancaster County and you'll find crocks, big? Inside those crocks are things slowly becoming more than they started as. Sauerkraut, pickled green beans, fermented corn relish, cucumber pickles made with nothing but salt and thyme and the wild bacteria already living on the skin of the cucumbers. The Amish ferment out of deep practical tradition because fermented foods last through the winter without refrigeration and because generations of observation taught them that fermented foods made everything else on the table taste better. And now food scientists are explaining exactly why that second part is true. Fermentation produces lactic acid, which acts as a flavor amplifier. It breaks down the cellular structure of vegetables into something more bioavailable and more complex. It creates hundreds of organic compounds that we perceive as depth, funkiness, brightness, and savoriness all at once. A simple spoonful of homemade sauerkraut next to a pork chop does something to that pork chop that no sauce in a jar will ever do. The acidity cuts the fat, the funky complexity mirrors and amplifies the savory pork flavor. And suddenly, a simple weeknight dinner tastes like something you'd order twice at a good restaurant. You don't need a root cellar to start fermenting. You need a glass jar, some vegetables, salt, and thyme. A basic lacto-fermented sauerkraut takes 5 minutes to prepare and about a week to reach its first usable stage. Start there, and you'll understand immediately why the Amish have never stopped doing this. Secret 1, they cook the same things over and over until they're perfect. This is the one that took me the longest to understand. And when I finally did, it changed my entire relationship with food. Amish families eat from a relatively small repertoire of dishes. Not because they lack creativity or access to ingredients, but because they've made a deliberate, generational choice to master a core collection of recipes rather than endlessly chase variety. A woman in her 50s in a Lancaster County kitchen has made her family's chicken pot pie hundreds of times. She made it standing next to her mother, who made it standing next to her mother. She knows that dough by feel. She knows how long that chicken needs to simmer before it's right. She knows exactly when the pot pie is done, not by a timer, but by the way the crust sounds when she taps it. That knowledge lives in her hands and in her muscle memory in a way that no recipe can fully capture or convey. And the food she produces from that knowledge is categorically different from the same recipe made by someone following it for the first time. Repetition builds intuition. Intuition builds mastery. And mastery produces food that tastes like love, because in a very real sense, that's what it is. It's accumulated care, paid forward through every batch and every season across decades. The most counterintuitive cooking advice I can give you, the thing I wish someone had told me 30 years ago, is to stop looking for new recipes and start going deeper into the ones you already have. Pick 5 dishes your family loves. Make them every week for a year. Pay attention every single time. Adjust, taste, observe, adjust again. By the end of that year, you will have built something that no cookbook can teach you, which is a living, intuitive understanding of how those dishes work and what they need. That understanding is what Amish cooking has always been built on. It's why a simple bowl of bean soup in a Holmes County farmhouse can stop you mid-sentence and make you wonder what you've been doing in your own kitchen all this time. It's not magic. It's not a secret ingredient. It's something much harder to acquire and much more valuable when you do. It's the quiet confidence of knowing your food from the inside out, built one repetition at a time, passed down one generation at a time, and sitting at the center of a table where nobody reaches for their phone because what's in front of them is already exactly enough. If any of this changed how you're thinking about what happens in your kitchen, I'd love to hear about it in the comments. Tell me which of these 7 you're going to try first. And if you want more of these deep dives into how traditional communities approach food the way it used to be made, hit subscribe. I've got a lot more of these coming. Thanks for spending time with me today. I'll see you in the next one.